Nehemiah chapter 5 as we continue our study from this book. Nehemiah chapter 5. Now just to brief you a little from what we have done, we were looking at how Nehemiah was working to restore justice among the people. And in this chapter 5, we have been looking at the social crisis which erupted while the wall was going up. And the first 5 verses, we saw how people were crying against the nobles and officials because they were starving. Some of them had large families and they had no food, remember? Others had mortgaged their fields and the vineyards and their houses to buy grain during the famine, and people even borrowed money to pay the king's tax, and they were forced to sell their children into slavery to repay that debt. And remember what we saw in this book, and how the people were being exploited by their fellow Jews. The wealthy were exploiting the poor through high interest and debt, bondage, and land seizure, and so on. And then we look at Nehemiah's response from verses 6 to 13. When Nehemiah heard this, he was very angry. And of course, he didn't just brush things aside and say, these people are powerhouses because they are the nobles and the rulers, and I better don't rock the boat. We know he took time, he examined himself, and he didn't rush to address the problem. And we spoke about the importance of self-control, because this is what we saw in Nehemiah. And then he confronted the nobles and the rulers. He told them as it is, not beating around the bush. He didn't say, well, I heard the old fellas exploiting people, exploiting the poor, and I wonder whether that is true. Nothing like that. He called them and he told them as it was. And he said, you are charging interest and you're enslaving your own brothers and sisters, and that is illegal. And he challenged them publicly. Of course, he told them how shameful that was, their behavior, and how it will bring shame on the community and give the enemies reason for mocking God. And in verses 10 to 11, remember he said himself, he told them, well, he did, of course, he lent them money, some people, and he lent them grains. Not only him, but it was his brothers and servants. But he did not exploit anybody. And then in verses 12 and 13, we saw how the leaders, they agreed and they took an oath to restore everything and stop charging interest. And Nehemiah sealed it with a symbolic act in verse 13. I'll just read it. He said, and also I shook my lap and said, so God shake out every man from his house and from his labor that performeth not this promise, even thus be he shaken out and emptied. And the congregation said, Amen, and praised the Lord. And the people did according to this promise. So the people agreed. And we said that the wall could not continue with such corruption. They had to address it. And we see as well how important was social justice to Nehemiah. He regarded it very highly. As a matter of fact, almost as important as worship, the way you see that he addressed that. And we said as well, brethren, that nothing affects the work of the gospel in the church than internal problems, ongoing problems that are not being resolved. But we are going to continue this evening, and by the grace of God, we should finish chapter 5 this evening. And the subject is when a leader fears God. When a leader fears God. And I'm going to read from verse 14, Nehemiah chapter 5. Moreover, from the time that I was appointed to be the governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year even unto the 32nd year of Artaxerxes the king, that is 12 years, I and my brethren have not eaten the bread of the governor, but the former governors that had been before me were chargeable unto the people, and had taken of them bread and wine, besides 40 shekels of silver. Yea, even their servants bear rule over the people. But so did not I, because of the fear of God. Nehemiah living by example. My friend, Nehemiah was a God-fearing leader. And in this passage, we really see what is driving his decisions, whether it is the handling of money or power or work. He did everything as a God-fearing leader. He is not a man that just commands. He lives it. He gave us he gave up rights and his money so the people could recover. He had a heart for people. In fact, everything is done because of the fear of God. So it's almost like he was saying, let God evaluate me. Everything he did. And what a contrast with the former governors and the greedy nobles we see earlier on in this passage. So first of all, beloved, I want to tell you that you cannot be a leader and you are not prepared to make sacrifices. Now, for many leaders today, you know what it is. Leadership is all about status. You know, your pastor is not high enough. You have to be a bishop, you know. And bishop is good but not good enough. You have to be an apostle, you know. And so you go up because it is all about status for many of the people who claim to be leaders in churches. Status, and we could see it. We could see how they move, yeah? And the status, they believe they have power. They have power over people. And somehow they are able to convince the people that they are so high and lifted up. And they have to be revered. And you have to respect them so highly. It's almost like, and they tell you, these people are the servants of God, as though the Christians are not servants of God. And you have to look at them because their position is so exalted. So it is all about status for some people. Look at Nehemiah. He had every right to take the governor's allowance, but he gave it up. Why? Because the people are already struggling. I mean, we have looked at the conditions in Jerusalem, in Judea in those days. The people could hardly eat. Yeah, they could not pay their taxes. They had to mortgage their properties, you know, just to pay debts. They had to sell their children into slavery. So it was really, really hard. And then Nehemiah, he said, how could I put an extra burden on those people? After all, they can hardly feed their families. They can hardly service their debts. They are in such distress. And I must say, brethren, it is sad when we use our position or time or resources just to serve ourselves instead of lifting up others. And this is what we should be doing, especially leaders in churches. The resources that we have is not to spend on ourselves to make us look. Sometimes you look at those people and the way they dress, and sometimes they even boast about the clothes. The last time a pastor was saying that his tie cost so many $1,000s. I mean, a tie, and the shoes and the clothes, and all these sort of things. Using all their resources on themselves. Where do they get the money? They get the money from the church, from the same people that they're supposed to be servants of. So what they do, they use their position, their resources and so on, just to serve themselves instead of lifting other people. But real leadership is never about oneself. My friend, it is always about lifting others, whether by absorbing cost or whatever, so that others can survive. And if we call ourselves a church, then every one of us needs to step up and sacrifice. That is the Christian life. Putting others' survival above our own comfort. Now we have to ask ourselves whether this exists in our church and maybe other churches. Because what we see today, we see a lot of self-centered people. I mean, not everybody, but we have a lot of self-centered people in church. And they spend the money on themselves. They hardly make any sacrifices for the Lord. Some of them, for years, they're not paying tithe. They make no contribution to the ministry, to the church. But every one of us, beloved, we ought to, or we need to step up and sacrifice, and that is the Christian life. The Christian life is a sacrificial life. We don't really live for ourselves, we live for others. And if we don't, we are not serving God properly. I know, it is very easy for us to go off track. But we must always remember what it is as a church. We're supposed to be sacrificial Christians. Look at how God, Jesus Christ, gave his life. He gave everything for our sake. And he should be our supreme example. So we have to ask ourselves, challenge ourselves, are we making sacrifices as a Christian? Do we think about other survival, the survival of our people, the needs of our people? Do we talk to them enough to know that they have issues? Some of them might be sick, and some of them want somebody to talk to. So we must remember that, brethren. That is so important. But look at verse 15. But the former governors that had been before me were chargeable unto the people, and had taken of them bread and wine, beside 40 shekels of silver. Yea, even their servants bear rule over the people. But so did not I, because of the fear of the Lord. Beloved, a God-fearing leader will not exploit the people. And that's my second point. A God-fearing leader will not exploit the people. Nehemiah, he feared God more than he valued privilege. Sometimes I wonder whether this is the way it is with all leaders. Whether they fear God more than they value privilege. Maybe not. Maybe we are more concerned about privileges and so on, instead of fearing God. But not Nehemiah. He feared God more than anything else. He didn't mind giving up all the privileges that he had once that he could please God, that his life pleases God. That was very important to him. So if you are in any position of influence at church, or it could be work, or it could be family, beloved, don't use it to lighten your load. Yeah? Lighten your load by making others carry it. My friend, don't assign tasks you are unwilling to do yourself. Don't take credit for work others did. Don't expect special treatment. Too many pastors, officers, and by extension Christians, sometimes we expect special treatment. And we must be willing to take a financial hit if it's necessary, even comfort, so that others might not drown. So even though I have to make sacrifices, financial sacrifices, to help a brother or a sister, I should be happy to do it. I should not be so stingy. And even though to help somebody, it might be, I might suffer a level of discomfort. But you do it because you are a God-fearing man. So whether it's a financial hit, whether it is time, whether it's comfort, whatever it is, you should be happy to do it once you know that I am helping a brother or a sister. So in church, it could be that there is a cost. Somebody is sick, or somebody is in need, and it is a great need, and I can do something about it. I don't have to say, well, let me see whether the church will do something about it. Yeah? But why the church when you can do something? So what you do in that, I know in some churches, the person will donate the money to the church, and they'll tell the church, well, you help such and such a person. But sometimes we see there are issues. There are issues where we could help because we have the resources. We might not have a lot, but if we just make some sacrifices, we can help somebody else. We can help a brother or sister that is in need. But what do? Oh, the church. And we go and we believe, oh, the church should be doing this and the church should be doing that. But you can do it. Yeah? You can do it. So when I talk about sacrifice and sacrifices, these are the things, brethren, where we could help another brother or another sister just by making a little sacrifice. But you know how we are today. Yeah? You know how we are. Everything for ourselves. Yeah? And we always think so much about down the line, whether I'll have money for next week. That is not the point. That is not the way God-fearing people live. We live by faith. So my friends, let our standard be what honors God. Don't you think that's right? So the things that I'm doing them because they honor God. It is not about myself. It is all about God. Not what I can get away with. So if you are a Christian, say you are a Christian and you have a business, yeah, and there are people that are in need, and you say, well, these people, they're real desperate. I can afford to pay them less. Say, for example, if the job is about $100 a day, but because you know that this person is desperate, you say, well, I'll just give that person $75 as a Christian. You think that is right? That cannot be right. Because the job is $100. That's what you should pay for it. But because the person is in need, and you know the person is desperate, you're cutting on the person's wage. Now you think a God-fearing man would do that? Now you'd be surprised the amount of people, in churches that are doing this thing. Business people, contractors and so on. Because they know, they claim to be Christians, but because they know that that person is in need and that person is desperate, they'll take anything. Yeah. So what do? You cut down on the person's wage. Well, I tell you, if you're a Christian here, please don't do that. Please don't do that, because if you continue to do that, God is going to put his hand on you one day. Yeah? And the same money you are robbing the worker, God will take it away from you. And you might be in a worse shape. Beloved, Nehemiah didn't just preach sacrifice. He lived it. And the way he lived it when no one was watching. Why? Because he didn't do it for applause. Sometimes even Christian people will do something, but we want everybody to know. We want the camera to be on us. Because somebody must applaud us. And if people do not applaud us, we are angry, You know that, huh? Oh yes, we are angry. But not Nehemiah. Yes, he preached sacrifice. And this is the way he lived. Yeah? He didn't live so that people can see what he's doing and people can be so, can praise him and these sort of things. No, he did not do anything for applause. And that's the way we ought to live our life as Christians. Sacrifices. We don't like that word. Yeah? And when we don't make sacrifices, we become lazy. We become self-centered. We become selfish, as though we are living for ourselves alone. But the church is a community. It is a community of believers. It is a community of brothers and sisters. People, the same Christ who died for you, died for the others. Yeah? Maybe God, by his providence, gave you more than them. But God did not give it to you so that you can keep it for yourself. He gave it to you so that you could help others. And we should always be looking for opportunities to do that. So that is the Christian life, beloved. And this is the way we should be living. It is for the honor and glory of God. We say that all the time, but do we really know what it is? So that God will be honored in the things that we do. Like I say sometimes, God will smile at us. How can God smile at you? God will smile at you if you are living for him, if you are keeping his commandments, if you show love to God and love to others. So this is the way, my friends, Nehemiah lived. And what an example it should be to all of us. And the third point, beloved, when a leader fears God, he will be practical. Look at Nehemiah. He refused the allowances. In verse 17, he said how he fed 150 at his own expense. Let me read that to you. He said, moreover, there were at my table 150 of the Jews and rulers, beside those that came unto us from among the heathen that are about us. Beloved, he refused to profit from his position. Remember, what he said before that. He said that the previous governors had taxed the people heavily and taken food and allowances from them. But he refused to do that and he said for 12 years, as we see in verse 14. Instead, he paid for everything out of his pocket. And verse 17 is real evidence. And he's not boasting. 150 Jews and officials at his table, not every quarter, brethren, every day. He had to feed 150 people. That is a lot of people to feed every day. Now, who are these people? Maybe leaders, maybe workers on the wall, and perhaps the poor who had no food. In this culture, eating at someone's table meant you are under the care and protection. Beloved, it is much more than a meal, It is about provision and relationship. Just think about it. Every day you have to feed 150 people. That is a lot of people. And he did it. Yeah? He did it every day. And hear what he said, the second part of the verse. Beside those that came unto us from among the heathen that are about us. Maybe messengers. In those days you didn't have internet and telephone and this sort of thing. People had to walk in some instances or jump on a donkey or a horse to carry messages. Then you had traders. We didn't have trains and aircrafts and buses and so on. So it would take the traders sometimes a long time to go from point A to point B. And maybe if they get to Judea, they might be in need. And he said it could be officials from other neighboring regions. So apart from the 150 he used to feed every day, he took care of other people, heathen people, not even Jewish people, not people who worship the same God. He didn't say, which God are you worshiping? Are you worshiping the true God? Well, if you're worshiping the true God, I can help you. If you're not, no, I cannot help you. He said, beside those that came unto us from among the heathen that are about us. My friend, he hosted them as well. So he wasn't just feeding his own people. He was practicing open-handed hospitality, even to outsiders. And this is an art we have forgotten in the church. Sorry to put it that way. I'm not targeting my church, which is Patience Baptist Church, because I travel and I speak to pastors, and apparently they have the same problems when it comes to hospitality. Long ago, the church was very hospitable. They didn't have much, but whatever they had, they used to share. They used to look for opportunities to invite people at home and these sort of things, to do something for somebody, especially if you're a stranger, if you're visiting from another country and these sort of things. But today, brethren, we don't see that. If it is done, it is on a very small scale. Maybe we are too busy now. Yeah? Maybe we don't have time. Maybe it's good to examine ourselves and see how we spend our time and how much work we do for the Lord in the time that we have. So hospitality is something we should never forget. As a matter of fact, hospitality should increase among God's people. But what we are seeing a marked decrease. So his leadership wasn't just talk about reform. It cost him personally. And it is a picture, my friends, of what godly leadership looks like. My friend, genuine Christian leaders don't use people for their own gain. They use what they have to lift up people. That's what we do. Yeah? We lift up people with what we have. So hospitality is a tool for unity, you know. That is something that should unite the church. And if it is something that unites the church, it is something that should be practiced. In a time when people were divided and discouraged, beloved, sharing a meal, what would it do? It would build trust and reminded them that we are on the same team. We are the same. Sometimes we always look for a good, we say on one of those days, on one of those good days, I will do this for you and I will do that. Let me tell you, it doesn't take much, you know. You don't have to invite somebody for a big meal at your home, you know, to show hospitality. If you can, it is good. But it could be an invite for a cup of tea, you know, snacks and these sort of things. So we are trying to keep the unity by being hospitable. And we should never let that slip. It is said when a leader fears God, yeah, they said his table gets bigger and his wallet gets lighter. Somebody said that. So when you fear God, your table gets bigger and your wallet gets lighter. But you shouldn't be afraid. You shouldn't be afraid of a big table and a lighter wallet. God is the provider. All the things that you have, who provided it to you? Wasn't God? So if you're using it for the honor and glory of God, you think God cannot replenish these things? But sometimes we're so afraid. That's all I have. We always have a little excuse. But I want us to go back to verse 16, and that's deliberate, by the way. I did verse 17 before verse 18. Say, yea, also, I continued in the work of this wall, neither brought we any land, and all my servants were gathered thither unto the work. He said, yea, also I continued in the work of the wall. All what was going on. And we have spoken about a lot of things. Yeah? The exploits, his hospitality, all the pressure that was exerted on Nehemiah. But you know, Nehemiah was always focused on the work God called him to do. Huh? You know, he was focused on the work which God called him to do. Yeah? He is staying on the site, hands on, as we say, working alongside the crew. Beloved, the leaders should be visible doing the actual work, not just managing it from a distance. If there is outreach, they should be there. Now, I hope you all will continue to invite me to preach open air. So if there is outreach, they should be there. When you come to gospel work, you cannot do that from a distance. You should be there. You should be encouraging people to do these things, and you should be among them. It's not a matter of delegating responsibility. You do this and you do that. You have to be there. You have to lead from the front. You know, the church is involved in work parties. You know, sometimes we organize things to do and so on. Well, the pastor and the leaders should get their hands dirty as well. If you have to swing a hammer, you swing a hammer. You know? Because, you know, this tells the church that this matters enough for me to get my hands dirty. Could you imagine you are a church and everybody is working and the pastor came with his tie, long sleeve shirt, and so on, and his car, He's just finished washing his car. He doesn't want to pass close to the people because they might dirty it and these other things. Yeah. So we have to be careful about these things. Yeah. And the other phrase is, neither bought we any land. Beloved, Nehemiah refused distractions that would profit him personally. Now that is a good thing we should talk about, because we hear of pastors enriching themselves. We have people who started ministry so in a school with 1-2 people. Now they have a big church, and you'd be surprised the amount of money they have, the amount of homes they have in every town, every main city. They have an apartment or they have a mansion, and the kinds of vehicles they have, and today's private jet, and all these sort of things, not remembering that they are just servants of God. So he refused distractions that would profit him personally. It was never about himself. His life was to honor God, for the honor and glory of God. And today we have pastors. Let me tell you, they are so rich, they cannot wait to be 65, just so that they could retire and go and live in Florida or Spain or in Greece, some place to enjoy the sun, because they have plenty money. They have accumulated so much money. Now you can say whatever you want. I'm sure those people, they were distracted. They saw money. The love of money conquered their hearts, and that's why they have so much. Yeah. They don't give. They're greedy, and the more they get, the more they want. Somebody did a research a few years ago in England, and I read the research. He said about this particular church, Prosperity Gospel, and he said he used to go to the church. People used to come from work with their little pay packet, and they would put it on the pulpit, and they will stay there and pray. The whole pay packet, they would give it to the church, and they'll stay there and pray, because the pastor told them, you give your pay packet, yeah, and the Lord will give you 10 times more. And he did that over a long period of time. And he said the only thing is, the pastor was getting richer and richer, and the people were getting poorer and poorer. Now let me tell you, for you to be a pastor and to tell me you have a heart to do something like that, could you imagine? You have a heart to do something like that? They were so distracted. Maybe when they started, they had good intentions, but when they saw the money, like Achan, of course, they could not ignore that, and they plunged themselves into this, and they brought the whole church behind them, fooling the church and telling the church, well, if you are faithful, if you plant a seed, if you give this, God is going to give you so much more. And who are the people with the money? Only the pastors and the officers. Who are the people with private jets? Who are the people with mansions in every main city? Who are the people driving Rolls Royce? Not the ordinary people, the pastors. Yeah. Well, you will never see that, brethren, in Nehemiah. That was not his style, because he was focused on the work, and he was a God-fearing man, and he wanted to know that his life honors God. Now let me ask you, do you think that way? How you live your life as a Christian, is it at the forefront of your mind that the things that I'm doing glorify God? Do you take stock? Do you evaluate yourself and see where you are? What kind of life do you live in the presence of God? Is God real to you? How real is God in your life? Do you see God as He is, the all-seeing and the all-knowing, the sovereign ruler of the universe? Or do you see Him as a God, He doesn't see everything. He sees some things. How can you ever fear God if that is your attitude and your belief? So my friends, neither bought we any land. Nothing that would distract him, nothing that will profit him personally. He did not want to see it. He was not interested in any of these things. And he told his supervisors, we are here to rebuild, not to profit of people's pain. And the whole crew followed that standard, because he said in the last phrase, and all my servants were gathered thither unto the work. Every member is called to the work. Leaders equip, and of course they join in. But let me look at the last two verses and we're going to end. Verse 18, now that which was prepared for me daily was 1 ox and 6 choice sheep. Also fowls were prepared for me, and once in 10 days store of all sorts of wine. Yet for all this required not I the bread of the governor, because the bondage was heavy upon the people. And verse 19, think upon me, my God, for good, according to all that I have done for this people. And this takes me to my last point, the cost of godly leadership. My friend, you fear God, let me tell you, it will cost you something. Believe me. If you, as a Christian, or as a member of that church or any church, if you fear God, it will cost you something. And leadership rooted in the fear of God will always cost the leader personally. But what did Nehemiah do? He absorbed the cost. He didn't demand the governor's allowance. He refused his legal right to make the people pay, because the people were suffering. He was so much concerned about the people. He could not add any extra burden on them. You know, the last election, one of the political parties had a very nice slogan, putting people first. And that's a very catchy phrase, putting people first. Well, let me tell you, we should be saying that in the church. We should be saying that more than the politicians, putting people first, putting our brothers and sisters first. It is never about ourselves. It is always about the other person, the other brethren. Because how could we ever be happy to know that we are living very, very well, and we can buy anything we want, and all these things, and we have people in the congregation who can barely survive. And the saddest thing, brethren, after they can barely survive, we don't even know. We don't even know. Because we are not people's persons. Yeah? We don't really care about people the way we ought to. We don't talk to people. That's why we have community. That's why we have church. That's why we have fellowship. When we come to worship God. We come to have fellowship. We come to serve. I like to go to churches where after service, everybody's engaged. I can remember in England, even prayer meeting at the tabernacle, people stay so long that they had to flick the lights, to tell people, well, you'll have to go home. And what they're doing, they drink a little cup of tea or coffee, they have a biscuit, and they just talk. Now, they just saw these people on Sunday, and they talk so much on Sunday, they're talking more on Monday. And Wednesday they talk more again. You understand? Talk. It is important. Unity, love. Yeah? And we have to look at ourselves as though in this context we are all leaders. Because that is the way we ought to live our life. And look at how he ended. My time is up. Verse 19. Think upon me, my God, for good, according to all that I have done for this people. It's a prayer for God's remembrance. What was the motive? Beloved, Nehemiah's motive wasn't applause from people, but remembrance from God. He wanted God to remember him. He said, think upon me, my God, for good. He appeals to God's evaluation. And he wants to know when God evaluates him, that he will get a high mark. It's not human opinion. Remember how he was slandered in chapter 4. He doesn't defend himself to the critics and said, according to all that I have done for these people. He's not boasting, but he's laying his work before God and trusting God to judge rightly. Why it matters, beloved? When you serve without personal gain, your reward shifts from earthly profit to God's approval. And let me tell you too, when you serve like that, it keeps your heart from bitterness. Nothing is bad when Christians are bitter, Maybe we don't realize how offensive it is to God. And the reason why we are bitter is because we don't live the Christian life the way we ought to live. Live the Christian life for the honor and glory of God. Yeah? And you will not be bitter. And if Satan tries to tempt you with bitterness, let me tell you, you will resist him. So, as I said, why it matters? Well, when you serve God without personal gain, my friends, your reward shifts from earthly profits to God's approval. You want to be approved by God. And don't tell me as a Christian, you don't want that. Every Christian should desire that, to be approved by God. For God to say, well done. Yeah? And sometimes we know what God is going to say by the way that we live our lives. We live to honor God. All of us. And that's what Nehemiah did. Sorry, my time is up. We'll continue with chapter 6 next week. May the Lord bless us all. The closing hymn is 762.